So the cranial nerves all come out of the brain, and most of them have their roots in the brainstem. So that means that in the brainstem for these nerves, you have kind of bundles or groups of cells, cell bodies that send their axons out along the nerve. So that's kind of shown in this diagram here. There are, of course, 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Most of them have their roots in the spinal cord. You can see some of those nerves emerging from the brain here. Oh, sorry. Most of those nerves have their roots in the brainstem, and you can see them emerging here. And then in kind of reddish color, you can see the roots. So for instance, for this nerve, nerve 5, which is the trigeminal nerve, its root is right here. So right here you have a group of cells. Their cell bodies are all right here, and the axons for all those cells travel out of the brain in this particular cranial nerve. So the only cranial nerves that don't have their roots in the brainstem are nerves 1 and 2, which are the optic and olfactory nerves. They have their roots kind of more forward in the brain. So the cranial nerves are kind of grouped based on what type of information they carry. So you have the sensory cranial nerves that are carrying just sensory information into the brain. Then you have the motor cranial nerves that are just carrying motor information out of the brain. Then you have the mixed nerves that are carrying both. So some of their information is going into the brain and some of it is coming out. So we're just going to go through each of the pairs of nerves in those groupings. So starting with these sensory cranial nerves. So first we have cranial nerve 1, which is the olfactory nerve. That is carrying your sense of smell into the brain. Then cranial nerve 2 is the optic nerve. That is carrying visual information from the eyes into the brain. Then you have cranial nerve 8, which is the vestibulocochlear nerve. That is carrying information from your ears into the brain. Your ears are sensing sounds, of course, but they actually also sense balance. So the vestibulo part of the vestibulocochlear nerve is carrying balance information into the brain, and the cochlear part is carrying hearing information or sound information into the brain. And you can see kind of diagrams of how those nerves travel in this table here. You don't really need to know all this detailed information in this table, but for the olfactory nerve, that is coming from the basically from the nose and traveling into the brain. Then you have the optic nerve is traveling from the eyes into the brain. And then here you have the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is traveling from the ear into the brain. And this part of the ear that's a big spiral, that's the part that's carrying, or that's like sensing sounds. And then this part up here that has the loops, that's the part that's sensing balance. So both of those forms of information are going into the brain on that nerve. Then we have the motor cranial nerves. The first one is cranial nerve 3, or the oculomotor nerve. That is controlling most of the muscles around your eye. You actually have 6 muscles around the eye that let you basically point it, exactly where you want to point it. So most of those, actually 4 of those 6, are controlled by the oculomotor nerve. And then the oculomotor nerve is also controlling your eyelids, and the muscles inside the eye that control your pupil size and how the lens is shaped. The pupil size is controlling how much light gets into your eye, and then the lens shape is controlling the focus of the image. So it's going to change shape if you're looking at something up close versus if you're looking at something far away. So that's all controlled by the oculomotor nerve, nerve 3. Then you also have the trochlear nerve, which is cranial nerve 4, that controls another one of the eye muscles, and then the abducens nerve, nerve 6, also controls the last eye muscle, the last out of the 6 eye muscles. So those nerves are shown in this diagram here. Here you have the abducens nerve on the bottom controlling one particular eye muscle. The trochlear nerve is on the top controlling another particular eye muscle. The rest of these muscles are all controlled by the oculomotor nerve, which is in the middle. And you can see that nerve is also entering the eye to control the lens and the pupil, and it would also be controlling the eyelid as well. Then you also have a couple more motor cranial nerves, which are cranial nerve 11, which is the accessory nerve. It's also called the spinal accessory nerve. Um, that nerve is kind of weird because like part of it comes out of the brainstem, but part of it is coming out of the spinal cord. So that's why they call it the spinal accessory nerve. It's still classed as a cranial nerve though because part of it's coming out of the brainstem. It actually descends into the neck to control neck muscles and also some of the muscles in your shoulder and your upper back. So you do need to know the names of the cranial nerves. For the spinal accessory nerve, you can either remember it as spinal accessory nerve or just as the accessory nerve, whichever one works better for you. Just bear in mind, like there's a few different mnemonics out there to help you remember the names of the cranial nerves in order, and whether you're calling it the spinal accessory nerve or just the accessory nerve is going to affect the mnemonics that you use. Then the last motor cranial nerve is the hypoglossal nerve, which is cranial nerve 12, and that's controlling the tongue. So both of those nerves are shown here. Here you have the spinal accessory nerve, so you can see that a lot of it is actually coming off of the spinal cord, and then this bit is actually the only part that's coming out of the brainstem. Then that nerve is going to travel down into the neck and control, neck muscles, also some shoulder and back muscles. Then here you have cranial nerve 12, the hypoglossal, which is just traveling into the mouth to control the tongue. The rest of the cranial nerves are all mixed nerves, so they're carrying sensory information and they're carrying motor information. The first of those is the trigeminal nerve, which is cranial nerve 5. That's the biggest cranial nerve. It's called the trigeminal nerve because it has three major, like large branches to it. It's controlling the jaw muscles, and it also carries somatosensation for the face, and somatosensation is just your sense of touch. So anytime you touch your face and you can feel it, that information is entering the brain on your trigeminal nerve. Then you have the facial nerve, which is cranial nerve 7. That is controlling all of the muscles in your face and the glands in your face, so like sweat glands, also like your tear glands, mucus and saliva glands, all those glands, and it also carries taste information from the tongue. So this would be the nerve that you're using to make facial expressions and, to salivate and to taste a lot of things. Actually, it doesn't carry all of your sense of taste. It is only carrying taste for the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, which would be, the front 2/3 of the tongue. So most of your sense of taste is going in on the facial nerve, but you also have other nerves that carry the rest of it. So the facial nerve isn't shown in this diagram. Both of these images are actually for the trigeminal nerve, but you can see the trigeminal nerve emerging from the brainstem here, and it has its three major branches that are going to different parts of the face. So it's all, this particular drawing is showing the branches of it that are carrying sensory information, touch information from the face into the brain, and then this is the part of it that's actually controlling your jaw muscles. But the facial nerve would also be traveling basically across the whole face like this because it's controlling all of your facial muscles except for the jaw muscles, of course. So actually the diagram for the facial nerve is here. This view of the facial nerve is showing the parts of it that are controlling glands. So here's a tear gland. It also goes into the nose to control mucus production there, and into your mouth to control saliva and mucus production. And then you can also see it innervating or going to the tongue to provide a sense of taste. And then here are the parts of the facial nerve that travel all across the face to control the facial muscles. The next mixed cranial nerve is the glossopharyngeal nerve, which is cranial nerve 9. That controls the muscles that allow you to swallow. It also controls some glands, including your largest salivary gland. It also carries some taste information and some visceral sensory information. So it's actually carrying taste information that comes from the posterior third of the tongue, so the back third of the tongue. All that sensory information goes in on the glossopharyngeal nerve. And also the visceral sensation is actually going to be coming from chemoreceptors basically in the neck. So it's actually, you're going to have a branch of that nerve that travels down into the neck, at a certain blood vessel in your neck called the carotid, you have the carotid body, which has chemoreceptors that are actually sensing the chemistry of your blood. They're primarily sensing the amount of oxygen that you have in your blood. And also right beside those chemoreceptors, you have what's called baroreceptors, which are pressure sensors basically, and they're monitoring your blood pressure in the carotid artery. So that information is all visceral sensory information, information about your blood pressure, information about the amount of oxygen in your blood, and that's all going into the brain on the glossopharyngeal nerve. Then the last mixed cranial nerve is the most important one out of all of the cranial nerves, and it's the vagus nerve or cranial nerve 10. So this nerve is controlling the muscles around your voice box, so that you can like talk. It also controls a good part of your autonomic nervous system. So it carries a lot of visceral motor information, specifically for the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. It's also carrying some taste information and some visceral sensory information. So this cranial nerve doesn't just travel down into the neck, it actually travels down, through the neck, through the chest, and into the abdomen. So it actually goes into the abdominal cavity. So it's very, very long and big, and it has a lot of branches. And it actually contacts most of the organs that you have in your thoracic cavity and your abdominal cavity. When a nerve is contacting an organ, we say that it innervates that organ. So it's supplying that organ with neural control, or with it's either controlling that organ or it's carrying sensory information from that organ. But in either case, it's innervating that organ by connecting it to the nervous system. The branches of the vagus nerve that travel to all of these different organs in your thoracic and abdominal cavities, those axons are primarily belonging to the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. So that means that it's carrying motor commands to all those organs, and those commands are related to resting and digesting. So it'll slow your heart rate down, slow your breathing rate down, increase the activity in your digestive system, stuff like that. So that basically is the reason why the vagus nerve is so important. The fact that it goes down into your thoracic and abdominal cavities and is innervating, carrying parasympathetic motor information to all those different organs in those cavities. That is why the vagus is such an important nerve. But it also does some other things as well. As I mentioned, it controls a voice box. It also carries taste information that comes from the back of your throat. You actually can taste a little bit with the back of your throat. That information all goes in on the vagus nerve. And it also carries some visceral sensory information that's coming from the aorta. So just like in the neck, you have the carotid body that is sensing the amount of oxygen in your blood and sensing your blood pressure. In the aorta, you have the aortic body that's also got chemoreceptors that are sensing the chemistry of your blood, and it has baroreceptors right there that are sensing your blood pressure. One difference between the chemoreceptors in the carotid body versus in the aortic body is the carotid body chemoreceptors are most sensitive to oxygen levels in the blood, whereas the aortic body chemoreceptors are most sensitive to carbon dioxide levels in the blood. Each of them can sense both, but they're more sensitive to one or the other. So here you have just a couple of mnemonics to help you remember the cranial nerves. There's also other ones that you can look up online. But one good one is, on old Olympus's towering top, a Finn and a German viewed some hops. So in this mnemonic, every first letter of each word is the first letter in the name of one of the cranial nerves, and they're in order from 1 to 12. And in this mnemonic, the S in some is for the spinal accessory nerve. So if you're remembering it as the accessory nerve, you might want to find a different mnemonic. Another mnemonic is, some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. So in that one, the first letter of every word is standing for either sensory, motor, or both. So that's just to help you remember kind of the functions of the cranial nerves in order. Actually, for the test, you'll need to know the function more specifically than just sensory, motor, or like mixed. So you would need to know for instance, for the olfactory nerve, you need to know that it carries smell information, not just that it's a sensory nerve. So this mnemonic can kind of help you, but it's not, don't just remember the mnemonic and then don't learn like the other functions or the more detailed functions of the cranial nerves. It can just kind of help you retrieve the functions once you've learned them.